You're listening to the Energy is Love podcast.
Energy is love.
The Energy is the Love podcast.
The Energy is Love podcast.
Energy is love.
The Energy is Love podcast.
The podcast for the universe.
The Energy is Love podcast.
I'm actually glad that it's windy.
Yeah?
Yeah. Or there's a breeze, I should say.
It's way hot.
Yeah.
Are we going?
We're good.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
As long as I adjust my chair 15 more times.
Well, I've got about 10 more.
Rob, good evening, sir.
Hello there. How are you guys doing today?
Good. I haven't met you yet, even though we just barely met, but over the course of the next hour or so, hopefully we get to meet each other.
We'll see how it goes.
Yeah. What's your last name?
Steedley.
Steedley. See, here we go. That's what happens when you record your podcast episodes in the backyard. I'm going to be so pissed if it gets all super windy. It'll be all right.
It's going to die down.
Yeah, it'll be all right. So, Rob, I don't even know where to begin. Like, there's so much that I want to talk about. There's so much that we're kind of like right in the middle of our lives. Not our lives. How would you describe it, babe? Like our thought process, I don't even know, our mindset, everything is changing for us.
Seeing things very differently.
Given the current state of the country and everything that's going on with just fucking everything, honestly.
Yeah.
So,
it's a little crazy right now. I'm kind of glad that my dad is no longer with us. He passed about 11 years ago. And so he was born in 1929 in South Carolina, in Orangeburg. And he was born in a barn because his mother could not go to the hospital because that was illegal. Legitimately a crime. So that
he was born in 29?
29. Same year as Martin Luther King Jr. and surprisingly Barbara Walters. So we see how that all went down. But born in 1929, South Carolina. His first job was a shoe shine boy, which sounds like super stereotypical, but like that's pretty much all he could do. His dad left their family when he was 6, so he's just doing what he can to help support his family. Joined the Air Force at 18, right out of high school, to support his mom and his brother.
Yeah.
And it was still segregated then. He didn't talk a lot about it. He had a couple of stories, but yeah, it's like, I don't know. It's weird because growing up, I lived in predominantly white neighborhoods.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in California.
What part?
Southern, in the suburban. We lived in suburbia, so we were living the dream. We moved when I was about 3 years old from Stratford, Connecticut to Upland, California on a cul-de-sac of grandparents. And my dad was like, "Why don't you have any white friends?" I'm like, "Why are your friends white?" I'm like, "Look around, man." Like the pool is limited. But I don't know, it's weird because he always taught me that. I was raised, I don't know how you were raised, but I was raised with I have to be twice as good as everybody else because of the color of my skin.
Yeah, I definitely wasn't raised like that.
Oh, okay, lucky you. So I tried harder. I did well in school. But I don't know. Growing up, it's weird because I have friends who I'm friends with to this day. We're a real close-knit group. And even through high school, they would never, if they had to describe me to someone, they could describe me to a T. There's a branch in my mouth. She's like, "Shh, listen to the wind, boy. It's delicious." I have a friend who would never describe me as black. He doesn't. So if he had to describe me to the police as a missing person, I would never be found. They'd never find me. What race is he? Human. Super funny. Like, what? But, growing up as a little kid, my skin didn't matter. I was, oh, my friend Robbie's coming over. Cool. I'd come over, we'd play and have a good time. Around the age of 12, I realized I was black. Even though my dad told me every day. I didn't, my friends never did, I never did. I had a friend invite me over to his house, and I showed up, and his mom I never met his parents, and he'd known me for like 3 or 4 years in school. and she double taked. Now, I'm not the tallest kid in class. I wasn't the biggest kid in class, but I could tell like it was something different. It's like, oh, he didn't tell me you were tall. You're so tall. I'm not that tall, lady. Like me and your son are that.
So it caught her off guard.
Yeah, and as I got older, more and more, I would tell friends. I'm like, hey, did you tell your parents? And I'm like, well, no. Why would I do that? It's like, okay, you'll see.
Baby, what are we bumping on over there? Do you see it?
Oh, I don't see it. I'm sorry.
You're good.
Is it me?
I don't know.
I can hear it. Yeah.
Is it that cable? Did you get it?
It's 100% me.
You're good.
It's always the black man's fault.
So you grew up. First off, I should definitely have given you the caveat that Steph and I are probably going to fuck up in some way, shape, or form, and offend or say something offensive. But it's not.
You've said the F word 4 times to a Mormon, so you're already batting 1,000.
So I'm already nailed it. But we don't mean offense, obviously.
No,
so you grew up in California. When did you move to Utah?
10 years ago.
Really?
Yeah.
So you've only been here that, I mean, there's so many questions, Rob. Did you grow up Mormon?
No.
Okay.
Because again, I'm black. That's generally not a thing. I've legitimately can't think of one kid that I've known that wasn't adopted by white parents in Utah.
Yeah.
That grew up Mormon their whole life. So the town I lived in was actually founded by the church. So after they came to Utah, bringing some more people out to California, and it's actually on Route 66, ran through my little town. And so there's a statue in town, and we found this out our senior high school that was that the lady, so it's a woman holding a baby and 2 kids hanging at her skirt, that the lady in the statue was LDS. We're like, oh, that's crazy. But I actually didn't know anything about the church until I was 15 years old.
Mm-hmm.
But all of my friends were LDS. All of them. Not a few, not some. We had a stake center and a meeting house in my town. But we only had one high school. It was very LDS, but I had no idea.
Yeah.
My friends, they invited me to church. Hey, man, you want to come to church with us on Sunday? I'm like, well, how long is it? Well, it's 3 hours, but listen, no, I'm good. I'm straight. I'm going to go to my church for an hour and a half, and then we're going to go buy chicken and go home and watch sports in our underwear. I'm straight. Thank you, though. You enjoy those 3 hours of whatever it is you guys do. But,
so when did you come to the church?
In high school.
Okay.
Shockingly enough. Not, you want to rebel against your parents. Some kids smoke, some kids drink, some kids do drugs, some kids get pregnant. I joined the most conservative white religion in our country, if not the world. So all my friends growing up, I said, were LDS, and so they had dances and activities, and I just started going with them. So my friend group was made up of a kid I've known since I was 3, kid I've known since I was 8, kid I met in junior high, kid I met in high school, and we were just the 5. We were just a tight-knit group that junior year, and so we always did whatever we could to hang out together. 3 of them worked at the McDonald's in our town. The other ones of us did not. We're like, no, we're good. You guys work, we'll hang out with you guys.
I'm always so curious because Steph and I both grew up here in Utah, so we're super familiar with the religion.
It's super different outside of Utah.
I know. I've been to other places and I've lived at other places, and it's completely different than the church. The church here in Utah is very, very unique. But I'm curious as to so you start going to church when you're in high school. Was the impetus just to hang out with friends and just to...
Yeah. 100%. So it was an interesting situation. So my dad's brother had passed away in 94, right around Thanksgiving, I think. And he was taking care of their mother at the time. And my dad wasn't comfortable with his mother staying with his sister-in-law, having to take care of her. That was his mom, old school. And so we put the house up for sale. Mind you, we were on a corner lot, but on a cul-de-sac. I had a friend who lived 6 doors down on a major street corner lot with a pool and a volleyball court, hot tub in the main bathroom, and had been on sale for 2 years. We sold our house in 4 months. I was so mad. But my parents let me finish out my junior year. I stayed with my mom's best friend, who was not LDS, but her daughter was, and her family was. And so I lived with them, and I was like, I took carte blanche. So before I was LDS, I was actually African Methodist. I don't know how familiar you are with that.
No.
Not at all.
So God and Jesus are black, and just the white man's a mistake. Like, it's rough. I definitely went in a different direction than what my mother and father wanted me to go. And so when they moved, I stopped going to that church and went to church with my friends, and that's kind of how it started. They started taking me to seminary, if you're familiar with that.
Mm-hmm.
And so outside of Utah, that's not a class you can actually take during school because everybody's not Mormon.
Yeah.
So from what I've seen, generally it's before school. And so we just call it, I always thought seminary was called early morning seminary because that's what we called it. And there was classes so school starts at 7, classes were at 6 at a meeting house. But they had an early morning seminary for kids that were in band that had to be at school by 6, which is terrible, to say the least. And so, but my friends were all in band, or were at band at some point, but they went to early morning seminary, the early morning seminary, because the teacher would bring donuts most of the time, especially on Fridays, and sometimes she'd take us to Denny's. And there's only like 8 kids there, so I'm like, bet, let's go. And so I went, and that semester they were studying the Book of Mormon, and I never even touched the book. I slammed the door in front of missionaries. At least I think one time my friend's older brother came with missionaries to my house, and I was like, my Jesus is black, and then I slammed the door in his face. And then 2 years later. So I got to read the Book of Mormon for the first time, and for me it just rang true to my spirit. And it's just been, for the rest of that semester I just read it every single day to prepare for class the next day. And because we did check marks, and me and one other person were the only ones that were reading it every single day and marking it off for the rest of the school year, because there was a surprise at the end of the semester. And so it was broken down weird. So that class was just full of all, like, freshman to senior. And then the regular early morning seminary was like, there's 2 freshman classes. So 2 classes of 9th grade, 2 classes of 10th, 2 11th, and 2 12th. So I would go with my friends to the early morning, and I'd go to one of the 11th grade classes, and I was a schmuck and would talk the entire time. And when the teacher asked me what we were talking about, I'm a chapter to 7 chapters ahead, because the early morning was a little bit ahead because there was less kids. So one time he asked me a question, and I went through 8 chapters of events in front of him, and he was like, "Get out." And I'm like, "That's fair." So I just hung out in a lower classman's class and just hung out there, and I ended up actually getting about 15 kids to come to seminary.
Really?
By the end of the semester. I was like, "Well, you guys got to go to seminary," and they're like, "No, it's too early."
We're going to pause real quick.
Is it okay if I unplug it?
Yeah, just disconnect it and then just hand it to me, or
Hand it to you.
let it go, and I'll...
Oh, you don't want me to do it over here?
Well, which one is it? There you go.
Oh. Are you down top? Okay.
Yeah. Anyways. There you go.
Oh, there we go.
The littlest things drive me crazy. I'm such a stickler for like the audio, and if there's a little tiny thing, I can't think of anything else, and it's totally distracting. So I learned a long time ago just to pause and stop and fix it. But okay, I don't want to get lost in talking about the church, because there are a lot of questions that I have about how what it's like being black and being in the church, and what it's like being black and being in the church here in Utah.
Okay. Yeah, there's a difference.
I'm sure, right?
Kind of.
You said you got here, you moved to Utah 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Just for like work or family, or what was it?
So I met my wife online, and not an order bride. We met on a dating website specifically for members of the church. It's called LDS Planet. And so we were traveling back and forth 2,200 miles, and I was like, "Hey, you should move to Connecticut because you're a nurse. You get paid way more out here. Cost of living is significantly different in Connecticut compared to Utah."
Yeah.
Her mortgage for her 5,500 square foot house, she lives in an old church on an acre lot, huge house. And yeah, her mortgage was less than half of what my rent was. So that made the decision super easy to move out. I was literally scared to death because for years, if you're in the church, the phrase Utah Mormon is the worst thing ever. And I, for years, I'll never move to Utah because I don't want to raise my kids out there. Because every friend I made outside of Utah who was raised in Utah that had then left the church was because of the things they experienced while in the church growing up.
Yeah.
And I was like, I can't do that. It's a terrible place. I don't want to go there. And then she's like, well, I live out here and it's a nice community. And the community I live in has been super nice and super welcoming. And the reason why I like it so much, it reminds me of the wards I had outside of Utah. It reminded me of the community, you know. And even though people have been there for like generations, this is the nicest place I've ever been. I've heard horror stories of friends that live outside of our community, like just a town over, about how bad their wards are and how rude people are, and it's cliquey and things like that. I'm like, well, glad I live where I live.
It's not too bad.
It's great. Like I already told my wife, I'm like, I want to get buried in the backyard because I literally never want to leave.
How do you so we're super familiar with the church, like I said. I mean, I was baptized. Because I grew up in this town right here that we're in now, and it's a super small town.
Yep.
And everybody here is Mormon. You know, we've got 15 different churches in this freaking town.
On a block.
Yeah. So I'm very, very familiar with the church. Also familiar with the church's history. How do I reconcile that? Exactly. How do you reconcile?
It's super easy for me.
Okay.
So I was born November 1st, 1978. The official declaration that the priesthood was given to all worthy men came out in the fall general conference in September
of 78.
September 30th, 1978. So as long as I've been on the earth, that hasn't been a thing I've dealt with. I've studied the church history, and there's some darker stories in there than not giving blacks the priesthood. But there is a movie that I saw, and then I finally found on DVD a few years ago, called Nobody Knows, the Story of the Black Mormons. It's a documentary, and one of the people that was in it, his name is Darius Gray, and I've gotten to meet this man and gotten to know this man. And I don't say that I have a lot of heroes. He's one of them. And he joined the church in 1970. And I remember, and his story comes towards the end, and he was not going to join because of the priesthood thing. And the missionary said, okay, well, I've got a question for you. Do you believe that the Book of Mormon is true? He said, yeah. Well, do you believe that Joseph Smith is a prophet? He said, well, yeah. Then nothing should stop you from joining the church. And so he joined. And that was it. I'm like, okay, I can roll with that. I was baptized studied the church in California, joined the church in Connecticut. The week after I got baptized, February 25th, 1996, my senior year of high school. Drastically different from how I grew up, because if everyone was Mormon, everyone's Jewish or Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
So I was in my graduating class, I was the only LDS member at my school. And I actually had like 4 or 5 friends come because they'd never even knew what it was. And so the second week I was there, my second week as a member, I was given the Aaronic priesthood. And after church, there was an investigator, a black man, came up to me and asked me how I felt about the priesthood thing. And I actually didn't know anything about it. He's like, well, how do you feel about the church not giving the blacks the priesthood? I was like, oh no, man, I got it 20 minutes ago. So, like,
what about the history behind? I mean, not even the priesthood aspect of it, but I mean, earlier, Joseph Smith, Brigham Young, the earlier history in regards to black people and the church.
So it's like in that movie, and I studied it. So the church was the first integrated church in America, and because people come from the South and they would let their slaves join. That was not a thing.
Yeah.
There's a reason why there's an African Methodist church, because they would not let blacks go to church in the South. That's how that sect of Christianity ever came about.
Mm-hmm.
When Joseph Smith was there, when he first went to the temple, there was black men that went with him. He ordained black men. So I can't say why. I don't know, someone got into Brigham's ear and the decision was kind of made, but it was never really official. It's like a super gray area in church history. But I'm like, when people ask me, I get asked that way more than I get asked about the polygamy thing. And for me, the answer I say now is like, how can you be in a church that treated black people so poorly for so long? And I was like, well, one, they weren't really treated poorly. They weren't given all the advantages in church. But I'm like, well, I still live in America, and I'm waiting for that day when it's fair and nice, because that day hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, like I said, I don't want to get, I mean, that's the other thing too, is, I mean, we have tons of people that listen in Utah. So I mean, hopefully they're pretty familiar with the church, but we have a lot of people that aren't in Utah. I mean, we'd have to give so many like explanations of things in order to continue to talk about the church and everything like that. But go research, go look up if you're curious.
Nobody knows the story of the Black Mormons. It's a great video. It's a little over an hour. It gives you a nice history about the church in general and about how blacks were a part of the church. Like, look, you can look at the history. You tell me the first integrated church in America, and if you don't say LDS, then you're wrong. Like, that right there caused a lot of problems in this country for the church.
I bet.
They already didn't like us. Oh, you like blacks too? No, sir. Not in my America.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I didn't realize
I
that.
didn't know that.
Okay.
All right, we'll see you on Sunday.
Oh, goodness.
I know who's weed whacking now.
Can't tell because
That's okay.
it doesn't really tell me which side it's coming from.
No, hopefully it's not too long. How are you sitting with everything today that's going on?
So it's weird because for me,
Is it LaDawn?
It might be. Do you want me to
Yeah,
check?
go holler at her. You're good. Go ahead.
okay.
I think
So for me, it's been weird because I have spent so much time around white people, which sounds weird to say it like that, but I didn't start claiming my blackness until, I got into my teens.
Mm-hmm.
And then I quote unquote played the black card so much and so often that my friends kind of started telling me to stop. And because it was annoying. And in fact, I had a conversation with a friend of mine, my friend Kevin. So me and Kevin have been friends since we were 3 years old. That was my first friend I ever made when I moved out to California. And it's like, why do you always do that? I'm like, I don't know. I did it because it was funny. A lot of the humor I got was from comedians that I watched, and they were most of the comedians that I liked were black. Richard Pryor, Eddie Murphy, Bill Cosby. Before everything.
The old Bill Cosby.
Technically during everything, if you want to be technical.
That's right.
But yeah, I mean, outside Bill Cosby, race was always the thing. It was always a joke. And it's like, I have to laugh at it. I remember someone told me this one, same thing that makes you laugh will make you cry. And being black will make you laugh and it'll make you cry. That's just kind of how it is.
Yeah.
In this country. But so to go along with what you're saying, it's like, it's not the first time. When I think I was 12, when Rodney King happened. And it's different. It was definitely, I can definitely say it was definitely different being in the area that it happened compared to being in a completely different state.
Yeah, I'm sure.
You guys kind of heard about it. It's like, no, that's all that was talked about. And I remember watching that video. I'm like, that's crazy that he could zoom in so well with that camcorder in the 80s or early 90s. But it was insane. They beat that man. They damn near beat the block off that man. And I remember watching that with my dad and my mom, who both were in the South, both went through segregation. And it was just like, that was the first time I heard, comply. And it now leaves a bad taste in my mouth, and I can get into that later. But so I just saw that, and the officers were arrested, and the conversations that were had, then, well, they're arrested. That's justice. I'm like, that's not. How's that justice? If a woman is raped, it's not justice till that guy goes to jail and gets some serious time.
Mm-hmm.
I've had friends that have had to deal with that. But for some reason, when it's someone gets killed or damn near beat to death by the police, if they arrest that cops, justice. The numbers of how many officers actually due time for that is so low. It's ridiculous to me. But I remember the day when the verdict came out and all 4 men were acquitted. And that is when it popped off. And I didn't live near Los Angeles. We were 45 minutes away driving.
Mm-hmm.
We live in a small cul-de-sac full of old white people. And my dad would not let me go outside after school for a week.
Really?
Like, I'm like, why? What's going to happen, Dad? But like, he's seen things and knew things that I didn't. So it was crazy just because I spend all, go to school, then come home, and that's all that was on the news. So I'd watch that for 3 or 4 hours and then go to bed. So when George Floyd happened, and I say his name because there's been so many, I wasn't keeping track.
Yeah.
And I didn't care. I can't even describe it. I didn't care because I'd seen so many black men in the news in Connecticut, in California. Trayvon Martin's another one. I legitimately was like, well, if you weren't doing what you weren't supposed to be doing, that wouldn't happen. I remember one year, like in Connecticut, 3 kids were shot, not at the same time, 3 different instances. Like, kid was shot in the back because he ran. And I was like, well, he said stop or I'll shoot. I'm like, well, why are you shooting? And I really felt the police were justified in what they were doing.
I want to pick that apart if you're okay with it. So the idea, because the statement that you just made about, if you were doing what you're supposed to, then you wouldn't be in that situation. Or if you would just comply, or if you would just listen, then you wouldn't have to, then that wouldn't happen. I think that in my mind, and it's something, because I used to think the same thing. I don't know if you realize or if you've gone back and listened to any of the episodes of the podcast, but I used to be a police officer.
Okay.
So I was a cop for 8 years. And that was exactly my mentality was, if you don't break the law, then there's not an issue. And if you just do what the officer says, then there isn't an issue, right? You just have to simply follow the instructions that are given,
Sure.
and then everything's fine. But now the way that I look at it is so vastly different. And I see it so incredibly starkly different. And also that I think in my mind, at least now the way that I see it, that dynamic of thinking that way was the systemic racism that is prevalent everywhere in this country, right? That is there across the board in everything that we see, watch, experience, do, and has been since the founding of the country, even before then. And so it kind of fascinates me that you two are, I would assume, I'm not putting words in your mouth, but that, you're essentially saying the same thing, right? Mm-hmm. That you believed or thought the same way. So do you think it's because of that thing, or do you have some other experience or something like that? That
you would think I wouldn't have that train of thought, being
right.
How I was raised, because my dad was, Democrat. I was oddly enough Republican, and because I am Republican and very conservative, but I was raised, if you don't want to die, do what they say, be super respectful whenever you get pulled over, whether you're driving or not, and you'll be fine. But I'm a little older, a little wiser.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of see what, and I've had these conversations this last few months, and it's kind of funny, the conversation I've had, it's like, well, if he complied, I'm like, I have a child, and I don't know if you guys have kids, but kids don't comply like most of the time, especially babies.
Yeah.
And you could definitely kill a baby super fast, but this went dark so quick. I'm sorry. But like, you don't kill them for not listening. Like and let me be crystal clear about this. I have 2 brothers who were cops for almost 30 years combined. One for 7, one for over 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And, and for me, out of every other profession on the earth, that's outside of the military, that's the most dangerous job you could ever do. Because you're literally called, hey, something's happening. Go check that out. And there's like so little information, you should never know what's going on, and you're literally putting your life in danger each and every day. And I have the utmost respect for that. And I know that there are definitely more good cops than bad cops, but when we're referring to murderers as bad apples, it's not okay. We can't be okay with there's a few bad apples. To put it in perspective, I'll put it in two perspectives. These are two things I love. I love these two scenarios. You go.
I keep getting the frog
Is
in
it
my
you?
throat. Yeah.
Oh, I was like, was that me? I
Sorry.
haven't eaten much today. Oh, but if you go to the store, you buy a bag of apples, and there's a rotten apple in that bag, you're not taking that bag home. In fact, you're probably going to find somebody, let them know, and they're going to take the bag. And like, oh, we'll just eat around it. Like, well, that sounds insane, right?
Yeah.
Okay. If you ever gone to a fast food restaurant and you actually saw somebody like drop a burger, dust it off with their bare hands. I work in food, so I'm cringing with everything I'm saying right now. They pick it up off the ground, wipe it off with their hands, put it in the bun, wrap it up, and then literally hand it to you. Guess what? They're immediately fired. McDonald's will no longer have him making fries for them anymore. Day of. But if a man leans on another man's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds in the street on public with tons of people videotaping him, it takes 3 weeks, damn near a month, for him to be arrested and charged. And then they finally up the charge and people say that's justice. That's ridiculous. If you were still an officer and there's an altercation and I killed you, how long do you think it would take? First of all, what are the odds of me making it into the police station? Like, let's be honest.
Yeah.
And then if I do, like, I'm definitely not, taking a 2 to 3 week vacation till they decide to come get me, just sitting at my house, chilling. It's like, oh, you guys finally came. Good. Phew. I was getting bored.
You said that kind of before George and everything that has happened since then, you didn't look, like you didn't watch the stuff. You didn't,
I didn't care.
You didn't care. And so what about this one? What about this experience? What about this time?
2 incidences in 1 day changed my complete outlook. And
Okay.
The switch kind of flipped for me. The night in Minneapolis where they took the police station, that was insane to me. That was insane. Because, like, you can say what you want about rioting and destroying buildings and, oh, no, not Target. But, like, they took a police station and burned that bitch to the ground. And I was like, where are the police at? Like, if there's ever a moment where, like, brutality would have been legitimized and like, no one would have said nothing about it, that would have been it. Like, shoot everyone in the head like it's Walking Dead, because that's unacceptable. And then like an hour later, my wife's showing me the news where the black journalist from CNN got arrested on camera with his cameraman, white cameraman and white producer. And I was like, okay, well, they arrested everybody. But I was like, I don't know if you saw that, but like,
Yeah.
he said if he couldn't say he was pressed more. And then dude, a block away, also press, also with CNN, but happened to be white, said, hey, I'm press. Oh yeah, just go over there. Why was that different? And that's like, well, shit, there's a real problem in this country, and I'm ashamed of myself for being on the wrong side of it.
So what does it felt like now, because I know for us things have slowly been changing. It's not even slowly, it's pretty fucking rapid, but things have been changing both with our mindset, with our thoughts, with the way that we see everything and kind of view the world now. And it's been, I hate to say hard, because it's not hard, right? We sit here in our house and think, or we watch shows and we have difficult conversations with each other who we feel completely safe with. It's not hard, but it's hard. It's hard because it's like this complete and utter cluster of mind shift and change. It's
Yeah.
like you take everything and you toss it up, and now we're trying to put the pieces back together so that it makes sense again. Whereas before, everything fit, everything had a place, everything kind of, do you know what I mean, had a
Yeah.
box that it fit into. And
Absolutely.
Now, so what has it been like for you to have, it sounds like kind of the same experience to some extent.
I'm realizing how many of my friends I'm their black friend,
Okay.
because I've been asked the question so many times. Rob, what can I do? What can I do to be an ally? I'm like, I don't know. Don't kill black people on the street. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
Like,
That's a good place
let's
to
start with
right?
that. Well, I'm learning how bad the word black is, because I definitely did not support Colin Kaepernick with him kneeling to the flag, and then after this, I'm like, my whole view is complete 180. And a lot of people are like, so I'll put, Black Lives Matter, and I think all lives matter. I think blue lives matter. I think but I know there's a lot of things in our system that needs to change, right now. And people like, oh, you can't do that. You can't change. That's too much. You can't defund the police. Why not? We defunded the schools. There's a reason why. People are like, well, black people commit more crimes. I'm like, okay, first of all, if we want to look at it realistically, and we don't want to say it's race, it's not a racial thing. Cool. Let's look at it economically. Most black people live in really shitty neighborhoods. Police go through really shitty neighborhoods. Therefore, mathematically, they're going through more black neighborhoods more, and they're finding more crimes. I've noticed this in the past week when people say, they're only killing these criminals. I'm like, well, no, they haven't been. There's a thing called due process in this country. I don't know if you knew this, but they have to go to court and they have to be found guilty, and that's not a thing that happens with a knee on your neck in the street.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's been hard. I actually had a family come over to my house last night and talk to me about it, and just kind of shared my experiences. I've had some really, really great experiences with police officers, and I've had a couple of shitty ones. So,
yeah. What is it? Is there other stuff that is going on right now? Like, I'm talking like the internal process of the shift that has taken place inside of you, of looking at things completely different. Like, what does that really feel like? Do you know what I mean? If you could, trying to describe it is kind of esoteric and out there, and it's difficult and challenging, but if you can, like, what does it feel like to have a complete 180 shift, especially considering that you're black? Like, for us, it's different, I'm sure, because we're white, obviously. But, like, what is it? I'm so fascinated and curious.
okay. So I can pretty much basically put it to you like this. For 40 years, because I've always been told, stop, why do you always talk about being black? So I've been really quiet about who I am.
Okay.
Now that's all anybody wants to talk to me about. That's the basic thing of it is, that's all everyone wants to talk about, like being black. I don't have all the answers. I'm living on a high school diploma, but I share my experiences. Like, I don't say, no, racism is real and that's it. It's like, no, I got called a nigger at 7, and I got called a nigger again when I was in elementary school by another kid. I got called a nigger again in junior high. I got told to go back to my country in junior high. I got called a nigger in high school, and I grabbed my friend because she was going to jump these two skinheads that were in a car. I'm like, what are you doing? Nothing, 100 and nothing, like, relax. Like, it's just, to me, I was supposed to be okay with that. If I don't do anything wrong, nothing bad will happen to me. And that's how I was raised and told to live. And then, so that was the black side of my family. But then all of my white friends were like, well, don't talk about being black. So I can't be black either. But I'm black all the time. And it's hard because people don't get it. It's like, well, I have friends that are cops, and and their families are passionate and worry about their safety. I'm like, I don't say hurt the police. I say, no, we need to protect the police, because they're doing way more than what their job title actually is what they're supposed to be doing. That's, that. One thing that I've heard a lot that's crazy, it's like, I have friends who had to do 2 years of training so they could cut hair. How long did you train before you started as a police officer?
Yeah, that's one of the things that is so asinine, right?
It's insane
Mm-hmm.
to me.
Yeah, it's like 3 months to become a police officer. Yeah. And even then, it's still like, yeah, it's a joke. Baby, you're so silent. I know you're just listening and taking everything in, but
I'm sorry. Yes, I
You're good.
am. Yeah, you put me on the spot like that.
Got her.
That was one of the things that I didn't have awareness of, and that's just been popping up as the training, like how many things we have to go through, so much training. I'm a massage therapist, and I had triple the amount of training as that. Then
you got to be a massage therapist. No, I'm not discrediting massage therapy, right?
Or hair or cosmetology or any of that.
She was in school for like a year to be a massage therapist, right?
Mm-hmm.
And police have nothing even remotely close to that.
Here's a gun and a flashlight. Have at it, guys.
Yeah. So that was something that came up, and I feel like that is such an easy fix on that part. That's like step one. What can you differently? Let's look at the training.
Because that'll keep them safe too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll keep everybody safe. Safer.
Yeah.
Right.
I find it fascinating how much, I guess fascinating is, I find it horrifying how much of your life was, you're not allowed to be this. You're not supposed to care, and how much that was, it took this step for you to be allowed to feel or have an opinion on it, to connect into it. That is such a deep form of abuse. That is so deep. And the fact that it took this before that woke up inside of you, because it was so programmed out of you.
Well, I think part of it was, yeah, that's a good way to say it. I was definitely programmed, but I think, my dad had a part of that.
Yeah.
I have to give them that responsibility. He didn't do his job, in a way, but I don't blame him, because he saw when people stood up, they got knocked down. When the first week when I started, this all started for me. I just did a long post and talking about my feelings, no politics, no nothing, just saying how I felt about the situation that was going on. And I got more responses from that than I've ever gotten. Over 300 likes and whatnots and comments galore, and people asking me to tell my story, which was weird, because I'm like, I've always been told to shut the hell up, Rob. We don't want to hear about you being black. And like, I'm getting comments and calls from friends who have known most of my life, and they're like, I had no idea that was your everyday, and I saw you every day. My friend Kevin called me, friends since we're 30, so we've been friends for almost 40 years. And he called me, he's like, dude, I'm so sorry, I had no idea. Right. I'm like, it's like, you gotta understand, man, I have friends that are transgender, and it's not the same thing, but like, I know that they aren't. I can relate to that, because for a number of years, I didn't want to be who I was born as. I didn't feel comfortable with who I was, and it took me a long time to be comfortable with who God made me. The other part for me with my social media is I'm not here to argue.
Yeah. Like
for me, I'm like, hey man, we're gonna fight racism, cool. And then I start seeing a lot of white people, I'm not talking to my uncle anymore. I'm not talking to my grandparents anymore, because they don't agree with what I'm saying. So I deleted them, I'll cut them off. I'm like, nope, that's also wrong. Because this is a fight that we need everybody involved in. Everybody has to be involved. And then I get video clips of like, a handful of black actors or a black activist who's a diehard Trump follower. And they say these things, and it's like, just don't talk about it, or it's really not that serious. I've never experienced racism. I'm like, cool, man. I can think of 5 instances I've had in the last 10 years, bro. Like, I'm sorry. Like, good for you. I can't say the same.
So, go ahead, babe.
Sorry. You said you're a father.
Yes.
And how old is your child?
My daughter is 9 years old.
She's 9 years old?
And she's mixed.
How has this changed the conversations that you're now having with her?
They're not.
They're not?
I've always because I'm more serious with it. I always teased her. I'm like, what color are you? And she's like, you're black. Like, well, you're white too. Like, I need you to be embracing both sides of who you are. Don't be half of what you are. Because that's the other part. Because if you're in this country, if you're any percentage black, you're black. Like, no, you are who you're made up of pieces. Embrace all of those pieces. Be 100%. Don't be half. That's not fair to her.
Yeah.
Because all of her friends are gonna be white. I live in a community. I had a conversation with them the other day. They're like, "Oh, we'll be colorblind. We'll see color. Cool. Someone else will, and they're gonna be a dick about it." So I talked to her about it, and we have those conversations. And I know her friends are great. Like I said, the community I live in, so welcoming. So welcoming. My nickname is Black Rob, and we can get into that story if you want, because that's actually kind of funny. But it's not racist. It's, hey, his name is Rob, and he's black. Okay. That's it.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about, because Steph and I debate this back and forth. We were talking about this the other day.
Right.
And
I'm not about divorce.
the narrative, I think this is such like dangerous water for me, I feel, and it's silly.
You're safe if you don't say the N-word. You're good. We're friends.
But I feel like there is a narrative, just like anything else, right? And when it comes to not just social media, but when it comes to like media itself, the existence of whether it's, you know, the major news channels and then social media, everything combined together, I feel like they create the narrative of what is going on, as well as how things are kind of portrayed. And I feel like there is a narrative surrounding like the conversation around racism right now in the country, as well as Black Lives Matter, as well as all these kind of interwoven pieces. And the narrative surrounding all of it, I feel like it's accurate, but I think that it's not accurate, because I think that, so what I mean by that is, like, if we just look at racism, or we look at like the narrative of black men and police officers, and how, do you know what I mean? Black men are singled out, black men are murdered more. They're all those things that surround the narrative of black men and police officers. I think it's 100% real and it's 100% accurate, but I also don't think that narrative fits everybody. That's not everybody's story. That's not everybody's experience, obviously, right? And I think that oftentimes that's important to remember, not by minimizing the realities of what it is for some black men, for some communities across this country, because that's important. And that's the, like, oh my God, we have to do something about this. This is ridiculous. But I also don't think that it's everybody's story. And I think that it's important to keep that in mind, that the narrative that oftentimes gets spun, and it's spun about everything, right? There's a narrative regarding everything. It's not everybody's story, and it's not always, I mean, obviously it's not always 100% true. We all know that about news nowadays, but how do you see that narrative, not necessarily the narrative of black men and police officers, but the narrative around all of these things that are taking place right now? Do you feel like it is super accurate, or?
I'm a firm believer that there is no such thing as absolutes. I had a conversation with someone a few years back, and we broke it down like, well, you can't put everything and everyone in a certain box, because they're not going to fit.
Yeah,
it doesn't make sense. You know, I lived in an all-white neighborhood for most of my life, but I've walked through some really, really bad ghetto and projects, like I was supposed to be there. I wasn't. It was a shortcut to my house, and I had friends who actually lived around that neighborhood that would have never stepped foot in that neighborhood because they were scared to death. And I saw people like, yo, what's up, man? Yo, what's up? Cool. And I just kept walking. I'm like, oh God, I'm not gonna die. It is what it is. You can't. It's everything's an absolute, and that's the thing that a lot of people aren't getting. It's like, it's all the cops. No, all the cops aren't bad. But all the black people aren't innocent either. Yeah, I know there's black people that do horrible things and hate the police and try to kill them. I know that. But I also know that there's a couple cops that might think. And my brother actually gave me we had a really good conversation the day after they burnt the Minneapolis station down. And he explained to me, it's like, well, they have two options. They fight or they get out, grab what you can and get out. And they chose the latter. And he told me, he's like, they chose wrong. They shouldn't have done that. And I was like, I agree with you on that one. And then I said, well, what do you feel about, because there's black cops. Hello. What do we feel about that? And we were talking, and he said, well, let me put it this way. There's 4 cops, right? And that one cop is the one that killed that guy, right? Now, what if that other cop tried to stop him? How would he be looked at in the rest of the precinct? What would that do? The blue code, right? Something like that. They're not gonna. Cops don't snitch on cops. Only time I've ever heard stuff talk like that are in gangs. I worked at a after school program, and one of my favorite kids was in a gang. Like that's gang mentality. So now, if I know you're a snitch, I can't trust you. So now, when you need help, you ask for help. No one's coming. Now his life is legit in danger, and the people that are sworn to protect not only the people in the community but also his fellow band of brothers ain't there. So you gotta see some really bad shit and shut the hell up and keep it moving. I don't know, man. I'm just a real firm believer that you can't. I think that's a big problem with me wanting to come to Utah, because my absolutes were all Utah Mormons are terrible. I have met one in my ward. I've never. I can honestly say, I live in a small, almost 100% white community. Everyone in my community owns a gun, and I have never felt safer in a place that I live, personally. That I will never have to deal. I've never had to deal with any type of racism. I've met racist people, but I've never been hated because of the color of my skin.
See, that's the thing that I'm talking about, is like, that is so significantly different than what, the narrative is in regards to the black man in the world today, in America today, right? So significantly different.
Well, I mean, I've lived in my life. I've done things that most black people don't get to do. Most people in general don't get to do. So when I was 14, I went to Europe. I was in the choir, and so we were touring Europe. It was actually for the 50th anniversary of D-Day. We got to go to Normandy Beach and sing the national anthem, all 6 verses. Wow. That song long. We out there standing for the memorial, and we're like crying, snot bubbles, the whole 9 yards. And this is like 4 or 5 years before Saving Private Ryan came out. So that first opening scene, Saving Private Ryan, I'd been there. And I was on American soil in France, and it touched my heart. And then, I love, World War II is my biggest thing historically. I love anything about it. And I like to learn about it. And, but France hates us in general. And I remember, we're there and we're speaking our broken French, and they ask you where you're from, and because they're super nice because you're in their store, and then you say you're an American, and then they're like, ugh. And for me, it was different I was only black, 60 kids, I'm the only black kid there, and I was the only person that got hate in France, and I was like, oh, well, this is nice. Because for the first time in my life, someone hated me, not for the color of my skin, but for where I was born.
Just because you're from
America.
America.
I had some pride in that, boy. Woo! I was excited. I was like, man, they hate us. It's great. They're like, why? It's like, you know how I feel now. You get a little bit of it every day. Now you know. But I don't know, man. It's the thing that I've done is I'll share things. I'll share posts here and there that I like. But I share my story. I can't share. I mean, I could share. I'll point people to stories of other people that have been killed or whatnot, and take it for what it is. But when you're telling me racism is real, I'm like, well, this happened to me. Well, this lady said it didn't happen. Yeah, you don't know that lady.
Yeah.
You've known me for 25, 30, 40 years. You know me, and you're still telling me? Okay, man. A big thing was I can't cut people off, but last night was tough. I did a post where I just a picture of just words, and it's just the pandemic is real, racism is real, police brutality is a problem. And I woke up to 27 notifications, and it was certain people that keep, I'm like, getting in an argument with you. It's like,
What do you think they're trying to engage you with? Like, are they trying to convince you otherwise, or trying
100%. Because they'll send me stuff. Like, I'll put something about. It doesn't matter what it is. If I say something's about racism, they'll send me something about, well, the Democrats filibustered against civil rights, and I'm like, okay, cool, man. And people have these conversations with me all the time. I'm like, yeah, man, because Democrats were actually the real racists, and they're the ones that are perpetrating this racism. I'm like, okay, but you realize there were Democrats and Republicans day one, and most of them had slaves, and they were all okay with it. And I had a friend give me some information that, so the deal was that we were only going to do slavery for X amount of time. And then because the South was like, no, we like this. This is good.
Yeah.
This free labor is bomb. They went, well, they're 20 years over where they were supposed to already be cut off slavery. And that's when that's when we said something. And they're like, oh man, no, we can't do that. It's like, cool, man. But we still were okay with it day one. Like, I don't care. Like, I don't care whose side it was that said, you know what? We let's end slavery. Cool. That should have been day one. When they said, let's end segregation. Cool. Let's look at that one for a second. Segregation, like, no one talks about that one either. Like, ugh. So and I'm using air quotes right now, if slavery ended, Emancipation Proclamation came out in 1865, and then in Texas, after 2 years and some change, it finally really ended. Again, air quotes. In 67, well, segregation didn't end for another 100 years. So, like, that's a horrible track record.
Well, it's
and you're going to
arguable.
tell me that, like, now, it's not even 100. Well, I guess it's 100 years. 150 years later, we're good. I'm like, after 400 years of 500 years of that.
Well, it's like the argument that
okay.
Segregation didn't end, because it's still, we live in a country.
Depending on where you're from, but yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Well, they'd already done it. Systematically separated us.
Yeah.
There's a reason why it's around a white neighborhood, because that's where they all moved to. And then a random one, that's why I was only black kid in my neighborhood. That's why I was only black kid in my grade. That's only why I was a black kid at my church. LDS church. Because that's how everything was set up. And people don't like change.
No, people don't. People don't like change about anything, right? Let alone, by the way, try to change what you think, what you feel, what you've been taught your whole life, what you've been exposed to your whole life. Good luck trying to change that. That's what we're seeing, I think, right now, is the people that are struggling with trying to reconcile that change that they don't want to happen. Like, they don't want it to happen. They don't want to try to process through, wait a minute, this has been going on for 400 years. Wait a minute, this really is an issue that is still in existence in 2020.
It's sad because the argument I get is like, hey guys, racism is bad. Yeah, well, in this day, on this date, this party did this and did that. Cool. Can you just not say? I literally did a post like, so can we just say that police brutality is bad and we need to stop it? All the burning and the rioting. I didn't say anything about burning and rioting and they all need to go to hell or need to be arrested. Cool, man. I agree with you too. Arson and property damage are terrible things. But still, it's like murdering someone who has a mask on because they're anemic and they just went to get some candy and we're just walking home. It's like, and that the worst part about that one, that Elijah kid from Colorado, that was a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
And we're now having that conversation. Yeah. We are terrible.
We are.
I struggle with, like, make America great again. When? Show me where that point was where we were great, and I'll show you where we weren't.
Yeah.
Agree. You agree.
Pretty good.
More than just.
I'm like, I don't want to go anywhere else. Like, don't get me wrong, but like people, I get these things all the time. I get Lincoln was great. Think about the great things Lincoln did. I'm like, listen, out of American history, that's my favorite thing, that he was assassinated, because I could not survive with a bone in my nose. What do you think happens when you free slaves? You send them back where you got them. That was like Amazon Prime back in the day. You send them back, and I don't want this anymore. You send them back. I don't want to go back to Africa. Unlike Lincoln, I dodged a bullet. Too soon? Sorry. I'm sorry. Your wife's looking real upset about that.
No.
Or like, why can't they protest peacefully? Like Dr. King peacefully. He peacefully took water from from a hydrant into the face and dogged on his ass and was also arrested, for peacefully walking. Or Colin Kaepernick. He can't get a job in the one thing he's good at, because he did the most disrespectful thing a person can do when you're praying to your God in almost every religion. He kneeled, and he was told to do that by a veteran. I found that out. That's crazy. I'm like, why does he kneel? I looked into that, and I called friends who are coaches in football, and I'm like, yo, why do you kneel? Like, well, it's a sign of respect. So I asked him to take a knee. I'm like, okay, it's interesting. And then when Colin Kaepernick first actually started protesting for police brutality against black people when he was in the NFL, he was sitting during the national anthem, and the guy's, that's super disrespectful, man. You should take a knee. That wasn't even his idea, and he got so much. I feel like, that's so disrespectful. And so I showed somebody a video of that where the guy actually says where he taught him that, and I haven't heard back from him since. There was zero reply. I'm like, guys, I legitimately, when I say, hey, what do you think of this? And I send you a video that would probably change your mind, I'm not being a dick. I really want to know what you think. You still think he's an asshole? All right, fair, dude. All right, I can't be mad at you for thinking that. Yeah. If that's your opinion. You think he's disrespecting soldiers when a soldier told him to do that? That's where your mind is. Cool, man. But please don't tell me it's raining when the guy's pissing down my back. That's all I ask. My dad told me a long time ago, best advice I ever got. He says, opinions are like assholes. Everybody has one, and most of them stink. And I'm learning that every day.
I think mention how change is the hard thing. People resist change, don't want to accept change. How do you get... I think there's... Okay, I hate this. I'm stammering. I'm so sorry. Okay. You mentioned that you had that point for them where they could see this, and then they knew they were wrong. And I think that's where so much of it comes from, is people are resistant to being wrong. It's like, even though they know they're wrong, then if they're wrong and they admit they're wrong, then they have to feel that. So they're going to hold on to whatever just so that they can be right and they don't have to feel that shame. So how...
We see that with our kids, right?
We see that with our kids.
Like because we've got a bunch of kids. They're all over the place. But the only one that's still at home is
Utah.
14-year-old son. And we see that exact behavior where he will refuse to say he's wrong. Like when he's made a mistake, or where do you know what I mean? Like, yeah. We'll even have conversations about the silliest of things.
Of They're just very, they are never wrong. Our children are never, ever wrong.
Never wrong.
You know what's great though? When you tell them, because I remember this conversation I had with my dad when I was in my 20s, he said, it's like, you don't know everything, but you act like you know every fucking thing. Yeah. Like in your brain, it logically, when you're in that age, you're like, yo, I don't know shit. But there's so much, you don't know what you don't know.
Exactly.
And so whatever you know is absolutely right, because it's all you know.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's a really good example of what I think we're seeing with everybody that wants to have those petty arguments over, do you know what I mean? Like, hey, let's just all get on the same page that racism is a thing and we need to fix it. And they're like, well, the Democrats started racism back in
Donald Trump fixed everything.
Yeah.
Like, let's be honest. Like, okay, let me be crystal clear. When I say I'm a staunch Republican, I never voted for Obama. Never. And I had worked with people that were black, and I never could tell them the truth, because they were literally voting for Obama because he was black, and that was it. He could have got up there and said, I'm going to bring back slavery. All you niggas are going to jail. We would cheer the shit out of that. Yay! He's black. And then I'd be like, boo. I'm like, that's a good idea. Shut up, man. But I've learned about him, and I respect the man, and I think he did a good job. And I know that Trump gets shit on all the time. But let's be real. You think Obama had it easy? The first black man in a job? And that's what I love. We had a black president. Yeah, the key word there is had. We should have and honestly, we should have an Asian president right now, bro. Like, I don't know what the Democrats doing. We got two old white men whose age combined is 150. Both have been accused of sexual assault. Remember Me Too? Yeah, I know people that are fired and never work again, but not these two dudes. They might run the country at some point.
Yeah, if we get
And
lost,
that's our choices. I'm like, bruh,
it's a joke.
I'm like, I give up, man. Like, why do I care?
Yeah.
I care, but I don't know. It's hard. It's very difficult living in this country right now.
It is very. That's
The black guy said randomly.
Well, Rob, I want to give you. First off, thank you for coming out.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Appreciate
It's
it.
quite a drive to come out here to the middle of nowhere.
I made my white woman
and
take me.
record.
She's gonna hate this.
But I appreciate it. We appreciate it. I know you started a podcast recently.
Yes.
So we can give you an opportunity to throw it out there so that people can go and listen.
Oh, it's so new. I don't even know the name. Drop my phone. So I had been thinking for years that I should do a podcast, and because people think I'm funny, and they're right. But I was like, I don't know, man, that's crazy. And maybe it's so bad. You should really know. But hey, kids, you're gonna have a podcast. Know what it's called. It's number one. I was so entrenched in this conversation. So it's called "You Can't Say That." It's on anywhere you can find podcasts. It's just a black head with a thought bubble inside its head. I'm out of my. I say things. I'm out of my mind. I don't think like a normal black person. I don't think like a normal person in general. So, I'm Black Rob. So the story can I share the story?
Absolutely,
About how I
man.
got the name. So I'm black and my name is Rob. Thanks, guys. It's been a good night. No,
Real quick, the podcast is You Can't Say That,
you
right?
can't say that.
You can find it everywhere. Podcasts are available. Cool.
Yeah, Spotify. I don't think it's on Apple, but small babies make those phones, so don't use Apple phones. Android all day. And it was actually just to tell some of my stories because they're funny. I'm a good storyteller. They're funny. But when this happened, I'm like, okay, well, that's the kick in the pants I needed because I was so scared to put my story out there. And now I'm just every day is like, Rob, tell us what it's like to be black in this. I'm like, oh, okay, man, but I don't have any other experience from anyone else's story, but it's just my story. And if it changes someone's mind, I had a ton of people like, I never knew, like, I didn't think that way. Like, they were okay with the things that were going on because, like, comply or die. I'm like, hey, man, if you're handcuffed and you're face down, that's way beyond compliance. Like, I mean, apparently you've never been to a BDSM party, but 100%, dude. Just telling you. It is what it is. So real quick, how I got the name and why I go by Black Rob now. At 41 years old in America. About 9 years ago, I had a buddy of mine from my ward who I met in Elders Quorum. His name's Dave. He had a little boy. It was 2, and he invited me over to his house. He said, hey, we're going to do some flooring. And I'm like, cool, man, I have no idea what that is, but I'm definitely down to hang out with you. And so I show up, and there's a couple other guys there, and his son walks in, and he goes, who's that? Well, that's Rob. And he's like, no, that's Rob. So another guy there named Rob. And this kid's the smartest kid I've ever met. And so he's like, well, they can't both have the same name. I can't identify them. That he might have actually said it like that. That's how smart this kid is. And so his dad goes, okay, well, fine. Well, that's White Rob and that's Black Rob. He's related to White Rob. That's his uncle. And he has to see him and call him that next time he sees them. So I'm like, all right, it's just one time thing. No big deal. It's whatever. I am black. So, when I have to fill out paperwork, I have to fill out black race. I fill out black, and ethnicity I fill out African American because that's the world we live in. And so he's calling me Black Rob. I'm like, all right, cool, whatever. And then we're like kind of laughing about it, and they're calling me Black Rob. I'm like, cool. Well, a couple weeks later, I come over, just me. Son walks out again. Hey, Black Rob. I'm like, okay, this is a thing a 2-year-old child's going to call me. Whatever. Years go by. He has another son. First words out of that son's mouth when I first meet him, Black Rob. Like, this is the thing. So it's in your family now. All right, cool, whatever, man. Like, we're really good friends. So it's cool. And then one time in Sacramento. So if you're outside of Utah, Sacramento's when they pass the bread and the water, representing our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Big ups to JC. He was the first one to be innocent and murdered, and no one cared. There was no rights for that man. They watched it. I was like, ugh. But anyway, so we're in Sacramento. They're passing the bread. He goes, Grandpa, look, it's Black Rob. If you've ever been in LDS church during Sacrament meeting, you know how quiet it is. And this little boy said it to make sure everyone heard it. So like now I have 150 people's heads turned looking at me, and I look at them and I go, I wonder who he's talking about. Who could it be? And his grandfather, so here's the part about someone racist that I really liked. His grandpa was very racist because his mom told me one time that her dad was racist. But he'd wait till after sacrament meeting outside the foyer and be like, hey, with his grandson who had already called me out in sacrament because apparently no one saw me for all those years. He's all, hey, who's that right there? That's Black Rob, Grandpa. I'm like, Gary, you're an asshole. Not in church, I didn't say that, but I thought it was hilarious. He passed a few years back. I still I don't visit grave sites. I visit his grave at least once a year. I respect that man so much. And then I said it once at the pulpit, and now everyone knows me as Black Rob. I actually host our 4th of July for the last 8 years. A funny story about that. So I work at Weber State University. I'm the marketing manager for Night Services, and I ran into one of the friends, her cousin. Her daughter and my daughter went to preschool together. So I hadn't seen her in 3 or 4 or 5 years. So she is there for an event happening at the university, and we talk and hug, whatever, and we're talking, and then her friend's there, and it's like, oh, let me introduce you. And she looks at me, she pauses, because she doesn't want to call me Black Rob in public, because that's just super racist and wrong, and it sounds terrible out of context. And so this is my friend Rob, and she shook me and was like, oh, I'm talking, and I'm like, oh, it's like, how long have you known each other? It's like, oh, we go way back. And she's like, yeah, I've told you about him. And this is where it comes back full circle. It's like, what? Remember that guy I told you about who did this and this? Yeah, and he hosts the 4th of July party the other day. I know. And nothing, zero, no. Then she says, Black Rob. This lady turns to me. I've heard so much about you for years. I look at my friend. I go,
Black Rob.
I'm like, that's all you guys refer to me as is Black. Damn it. And she's like, can I call you that? I'm like, well, I mean, it's accurate. So yeah, go ahead, man. It's like, whatever. The one thing I've learned in all this, you still got to laugh. Same thing make you laugh, make you cry. And I've cried enough, so let's laugh a little bit. Let's be serious. These are serious and things that are going on in our country. But damn, if we lose our sense of humor, it doesn't even matter. That's a way worse problem.
Yeah.
That's a way worse problem.
Well, thank you, man.
Thank you so much.
We really appreciate the time.
No doubt.